Hello, everyone. Lisa Starr back with an episode of StarCast. You know, we talk so much about music and the role music plays in our lives. Most of us have music we respond to immediately. When you hear that song, the memory brings you back to somewhere that you were, or a childhood memory or a fond memory, sometimes a sad memory. Music is so evocative and so important to life and experiences. And that's why it's super important to have it in the spa world. But we've had a lot of challenges getting the right music in our spas with licensing and royalties and repetitiveness and all the issues that come with that. So our guest today is someone who has found the solution to all of those things. I'm happy to welcome Freddie Morose. He's the CEO of Myndstream, founder and CEO of Myndstream. And welcome, Freddie, to the podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So you and I first met, I guess it was at a Global Wellness Summit a few years back. And you were kind of new on the wellness scene. And we're like, who's this nice young man from England? What's he doing here? And a lot has happened in those last few years.
Yeah, exactly. Like every good relationship born at the Global Wellness Summit, it feels like. Certainly I still feel like a newbie within the wellness scene, although very much an adopted newbie within the wellness industry family. So it's been a great pleasure to be part of the industry the last, call it 3 or 4 years now, which is good fun.
So Freddie, you come from a family that has a music business. So you had a little bit of a background in this, although I know you had a detour as a chartered accountant. But tell us a bit about how Myndstream came about.
Yeah, sure. So my family's business, so my father, Philip, founded a company called Cutting Edge Group, which is the leading independent provider of music for film, television, advertising, and gaming globally. We do about 150 to 160 soundtracks a year, and we're a sort of a full stack music servicing company from an operation standpoint. So everything from understanding your publishing to distribution. We provide composers. We have quite an acquisitive side to our business as well. So we acquire music rights, be it catalogs or writer's share. So what we would say is we're a full stack music servicing company with a real specialty in rights management. That's kind of the background. And as I mentioned, this acquisitive streak, we in 2019 acquired one of the leading catalogs of ambient new age music. It was called Real Music, and it was owned by a single proprietor out of
Real Music. Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So it had some amazing artists on it, which is what kind of attracted us to it. Liquid Mind, who's the #1 sleep musician, it's a 14-time Grammy nominee, 2-time winner, and a whole host of artists who we felt there was a quality there, which stood it to some degree ahead of its peers. And at the same time, my father Philip had made a personal investment in a mental health business a handful of years before. So it would have been around the same time Calm was coming out. Sadly, it was not Calm for the whole family. It was a company called Happy Not Perfect, and it essentially focused on teenage girls and anxiety induced by social media usage. So kind of the toxicity of social media at the time. And what Philip became very clearly aware of was mental health is not a flash in the pan, it's here to stay. And so from a personal standpoint, he was always thinking, well, what can I do to potentially make a bit of an impact and do something with this platform he's created to, leave a bit of a legacy and do some good. And so he always had mental health in his mind. And then this catalog acquisition came up, and it was in the wellness industry. He was familiar with it. Certainly he knew the numbers behind it, and the wellness industry is significantly larger than the music industry. And so there were a few things going on in there that, made it an interesting buy. And so we bought it, and this was in 2019. We managed it as a label does for a few years. I joined the business in 2020. So Real Music was still being managed at the time. I just finished my articles, so I became a chartered accountant with PwC, qualified and joined Cutting Edge. And this was during COVID. And so COVID kind of bought us a bit of time. There were some tailwinds, people at home listening to more music, things like Alexa playing to help me sleep was really causing a lot of consumer traffic. And so we had an opportunity to say, okay, well, our catalog's growing a lot by no reason of our own. This was complete sort of fortune in terms of the timing of the acquisition. So we knew it wasn't going to last. So we had to come up with a strategy. And because I was, fresh faced into it, I started thinking about it and wanting to make a bit of a difference if I could. And I got the luxury of starting to spend time with the asset and start thinking about the industry. And that's when we reached out to the Global Wellness Institute, because what became clear is there was a real difference between the music we were used to, which is music to entertain people, and the music that we had essentially bought into, which was functional music there to elicit particular outcomes, physiological or psychological. And the way you thought about that music had to be different. There needed to be a different type of intention, a different type of understanding. Research was going to be much more important to how we managed this asset we just acquired into, this functional music. And so when we started doing that research, the Global Wellness Institute was clearly where we ended up consistently coming back to with every white paper we read. And so we reached out. We got lucky again with our timing. This was just when they were writing the trend at the summit for the Hollywoodization of the wellness industries in 2021. Here I was representing a film music company from Hollywood, saying, "Hey, we want to learn more about the wellness industries." And to Nancy Davis's credit at the Global Wellness Summit, she very kindly suggested, "Hey, we haven't had people come on stage and really talk about music and the impact it has to mental health. Would you like to come and speak at the summit in Boston?" And that ended up being a real launchpad moment for us, where we took what was kind of just a catalog concept and started thinking about, okay, well, maybe there's a business here. Maybe there's an opportunity to understand the music asset better, make it fit for purpose within spa, hospitality, and then other market segments where this kind of concept of functional music could become a little bit of a tool, a utility to improve care outcomes. So that was kind of the birth of the journey, as it were. And we've been kind of riding that exciting wave ever since.
And to think about not only relaxation music, but intentional music, right? Like we all like or respond to a certain kind of music, and it's different for every person. You know, one likes jazz and one likes new age. I'm an 80s rock girl myself. So, but we know that there are elements of music that everyone responds to. And I was looking at the study on the Myndstream website from the British Academy of Sound Therapy. And they did a study of almost 7,500 people, and 90% of them said they used music to relax. Really, that's really compelling. 52% said they used it to aid concentration. Also good to know. So what they said was that the best music for relaxation was slow and simple, didn't have lyrics, and had this 13-minute window of listening. So Freddie, can you speak a little bit about how Myndstream approaches, creating music that fits the parameters for the different moods you're trying to elicit?
Yeah, there's a few things that triggers that I'd like to respond to, if you don't mind. So the first being that there are properties to music. There are certainly there's understood foundations of music and composition, that certain aspects of composition elicit particular reactions or outcomes physiologically, as an example. So as you'll see, if you go into that research, or if you start looking into any music, they'll cite certain tempo ranges or certain aspects of composition that can have certain effects. Be it, as a very simplistic example, slower music is good for relaxation. So slower tempo ranges or BPMs, it elicits more kind of reduced heart rate variability and slightly lower, so slightly more relaxed sort of outcomes. But what I would say is there's other layers to music as well. It's not just about the framework of what would be expected in a research laboratory. There are aspects to music that are less, call it, tangible. There's optionality that needs to come through music. So as an example to this, let's take, there's a song called Happy by Pharrell, right? Very upbeat, major piece of music, kind of universally regarded as a high tempo, energetic, happy song. Now, for most people, when you play that song, it can boost your mood. For anyone who's listened to it in happy moments, it can have a significantly higher boosting effect than those who are less associated with that song. So if you've previously used that piece of music to improve your mood at other times, or if it's a particularly joyous piece of music, so now let's say that same song that maybe you're listening to for the first time, if I happen to do my first dance at my wedding to that song, it will have a slightly higher effect for me when you put it on versus you, if it's the first time you listen to it.
Interesting.
But conversely, if I had happened to listen to that piece of music whilst I was in a car accident and had a significantly traumatic effect to it, it doesn't matter if it's major key with all the right BPM ranges to elicit a particular reaction, it can trigger a trauma response because I've listened to it in a high stress moment. So there are essentially memory anchors that people have with regards to particular pieces of music or elements of composition that also can't be disregarded. And that's why whenever you're thinking about what kind of music should we play in a particular setting, I always think intention first. So, what outcomes are you looking to achieve? What's the best practices here? How can you ensure you've optimized for function and then deliver high quality music? Because first of all, music isn't just science, it is art. And so it needs to be something you want to listen to. It needs to be enjoyable. So quality of musicianship, interest behind that musicianship, can it be slightly different to the same kind of, I often joke with most of the people in spa that there's just one whale who's collecting the most amazing amount of writer's share across all of spas globally, the greatest performing musician of all time. But,
a lot of royalties, that whale.
A lot of royalties. I'd love to represent that whale. Sadly, I don't. So I have to find new musicians to do things slightly differently. But the idea here is that spa music doesn't have to be one style of music. Spa stands for experience. It stands for creating the moments for guests, be it to relax, to energize, to restore. There are so many different ways to heal. There are so many different things that someone will go to a spa for. So why on earth is there only one style of music to service all of those things? Particularly when every single guest, as you mentioned, you're an 80s rock person, maybe I'm hip hop. We might like things very differently, but we may go to the spa because we're both struggling to sleep and we might want to have something that helps us get to a point where we can sleep better. And so now here we are with a similar, we're drawn together by symptom and by desired outcome with very different styles of ways we want to listen to. Certainly the spa can do better, I believe, in curating an environment, an ambiance that is more fitting for an individual guest, as well as also more fitting for the treatment that they're looking to come for and the symptoms that they're looking to alleviate or the outcomes they're looking to achieve. So we always think of that in that regard. And then the final aspect, as well as also kind of the core foundational framework, the quality of the music and making sure it's actually enjoyable to listen to. The third and final aspect of it is optionality. Make sure you account for the bias that you will never know. I have no idea if anyone who's about to listen to this music may be triggered by the sound of, a flute, as an example. And so therefore, you can't just deliver flute music. No matter how beautiful or one may think it is, it can be distracting for someone else. So you have to give essentially variability to be able to provide the final piece of that equation, in my view, at least.
Now that makes a lot of sense because you're right. You can't predict everyone's response to the music and you don't want it to be so repetitive, and that's what often happens. And in spa playlists, you're hearing the same thing. I visited a spa in Costa Rica last month to do a mystery shop audit, and I had a lot of spa treatments. And the first few, it was sort of Hindi chanting music, and I really like that. And the first few services, I thought, this is great. Well, by the 10th service, you're saying, okay, I've had enough of the Hindi chanting music. What else do you have? So you're right. You've got to have options for people.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that's something which, fatigue of listening to music is a real thing. I think you want to be able to create refresh, but you want to create frameworks to refresh within. So, one thing which I always think about is the way we position ourselves and the way that we think about our composers is ensuring that we understand the expertise that we're coming from. So knowing that when you're creating these soundtracks, ensuring that you create that level of trust, that authority, that ability to be relied upon, and that the music's going to be good, but create enough variability within those frameworks to then make sure that a therapist is going to enjoy having it on as well as the guest, because both, your therapist is essentially the frontline person who is kind of quote unquote selling the ambiance, the experience. If they hate the music, your guest will hate the music. It's inevitable. So the only way for me, at least, to think about it as a partner who doesn't get to be in the room every single time a treatment's offered with our music in there is to make sure that the therapist is the biggest champion and advocate of the music that they will be playing for that guest. And so, running research surveys as an example for us and getting insights from therapists about what's performing well, what's not performing well, what should be shifted, how often should we be rotating, when are you starting to get tired of it? Having a dialogue with therapists as well as guests, as well as the researchers, just speaking to people and doing the simple stuff well is kind of, for me at least, it's not a very secret source, but it's certainly something that we try and hold ourselves accountable for, because at the end of the day, we're always looking to try and improve the experience, and the therapist is kind of the most critical person in that equation.
Percent. I mean, they're in that treatment room for 4, 5, 6 hours. And do they want to listen to the same soundtrack over and over? I mean, I guess it becomes like some kind of Chinese water torture eventually, no matter what the music is, right? So there again, the optionality. I love how Myndstream has the playlists set by goal, right? Like to relax or to calm or to awaken. How many different channels do you provide in that venue?
Gosh, I'd have to ask my head of music for that now. I don't know.
A lot.
Thankfully, I've been able to surround myself with people who are significantly better than me in almost every single way, and so now I find myself almost uncertain of exactly how far we've gotten to. But what I would be able to say in response to that is the way that Jordan, who's our head of music and creative, and has kind of really taken this forward in terms of this outcome-based methodology and thinking about the programming of music and the creation of new music and the briefing of composers and artists. Everything is about trying to achieve the function of particular intentions. And we speak regularly to our therapists. Certainly we categorize it into the same kind of key ways that you would consider any protocols that are delivered, treatment protocols. And whenever we hear a new one, we start thinking about what music could go to it. So, and that hence why it kind of becomes a bit of a snowball. But what I'd say is it started with the same foundational elements of energize and recharge and relax and meditate and sleep were kind of the foundational forefathers, if you will. But since then, there have been iterations of each concept to make it slightly more nuanced, slightly more tweaked and intentional. And again, our main job is, even though we're music providers, we're just trying to listen. It's kind of understanding, what ambiance are you trying to set? What have you invested in to help achieve that ambiance? Is it, have you set lighting to a certain level? What kind of fragrances are you using? What are your treatment protocols as you're achieving it? Do you do a pre-survey, a post-survey? All these concepts of every touch point you have in the guest experience. All we're trying to understand is, what is in your mind as you do every action, because every action has some consideration to it, some reason why it's been put into that particular flow. So every learning we get, the better we can be the soundtrack partner to that particular moment, be it during, before, after the treatment, whilst the guest is back at home to recall them to the treatment. So we think of ourselves very much as an extension of a location wherever possible. And so the reason I answer that question with a rather fluffy response, if I may say so myself, is because those same kind of frameworks that we use, if you want to call them that, the kind of the modalities, the outcomes that we're trying to think about, we try not to be too prescriptive in terms of how we think about it, more listen to partners to then understand how they think about it, and then tweak the expertise that we have, and most importantly, the expertise that our partners have around us, like the research institutions we work with, to help inform the briefing process and make sure that the curation process is as pure as possible.
Right. And, one person's relax might be another person's recover. So it's right, I guess, for you to say we're not really prescriptive about it. We just try to go on the feedback that we receive.
We can support in terms of providing our understanding. And certainly and particularly definitions, I think this is probably my biggest learning as I've entered this industry, is how important defining things is, and using common language and providing a clear platform. And this is something which I think I've had the great privilege of being involved with the Global Wellness Institute since joining this industry. And I now sit on that board, and I chair something called the Music for Health and Wellbeing Initiative. And really the foundation of that is about definitions, understanding language and reclaiming the appropriate language. And so whilst we try and listen to the ethos, the mentality behind something, we're certainly there to support with defining it. And that's where I think presenting as an expert and making sure that we are consistently someone that can be relied upon and trusted to be that expert in the room, for us, that's critically important. And whilst I may not always be the expert, because certainly I rarely am if I can hold my hands up. Thankfully, I'm surrounded by people in my team who are, and so I get to be able to rely on them at the right moments to bring them in to help define in the right situations. So I say that because I think it's critically important that we need to address the fact that one person's recover, maybe someone else's relax. I think it needs to be it needs to be considered a priority that everyone universally is supported with particular modalities that we can all work towards, because that will allow us common language. And when you have common language, you can start improving solutions quite clearly. So that's a passion of mine, as it were. And certainly we're on that journey ourselves.
Well, it sounds like it is a passion of yours, but that's a good one given that your job is to curate music. So, Freddie, let's talk about the logistics of that music. I mean, the music that you get in a Myndstream subscription, is any of it like music that had already been written that you have stripped away elements of, or is it all purpose built? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we have, I guess, layers of ways of working, I would say. The most simple and easy kind of get up and go starter, as it were, is our subscription service model, which is something called the Stream. And essentially it's a subscription platform that houses assets that we own and represent. And they are existing pieces of music that we have either written for a specific purpose or were written for a specific purpose. And I use those two purposefully separately, because some of our artists come to us with a particular creative vision. But I should say that all the music that is within the Stream all has a very specific intention behind it, which is why we've then ended up playlisting it in a particular way or curating it in a particular way. So all of those assets are pre-written. They are then essentially, we use our outcome-based methodology to then try and consider what is the best practice of how you would want to use this type of music in a location. So thinking about duration of treatment length, thinking about the need to have certain spaces with very long durations, such as 12, 14 hour playlists that one doesn't have to worry about, but can fill space. Then different styles. So, maybe you want a reception area with a bit of a vibe to it. So can we bring more rhythmic percussive elements into that? Maybe we want something which is a bit more nature-based, if that is a sort of a particular ambiance that is important to a location. And so certainly having a whole playlist dedicated to having a bit more of a kind of clear natural component to it. Others which are just unique, different style, slightly interesting or modern takes on what could be an ambient sort of spa music, quote unquote, just trying to change the soundscape of it a little bit, if you will. So that's a subscription service. You get essentially the full range of pre-curated soundscapes. I think I don't actually know how many there are at the moment. I think it's about 90 plus, all outcome and duration based, which we add to all the time and kind of rework all the time. And then, and that you can subscribe to if you're an individual therapist, or you just want one soundtrack to go throughout all of your property. That's $250 per annum. And then if you want to have different music in different areas and different locations, that's $750 per annum. And that's inclusive of your performance license for your relevant PROs as well. So it can be quite cost effective, particularly.
I'll say that's a really good price. So $750 a year for multiple zones. Is there a limit on the number of zones with that?
So we wanted to build a model that wouldn't be punitive to having good music in every area in your spa. So no matter what size your spa is, we wanted to make sure that you had high quality music everywhere. And the view was, and this takes you to the kind of the second way we work, because we certainly, as I say, want to be an extension of a location and not just deliver kind of how we hear music and just let it be. So we tried to price it low in the hopes that someone will say, okay, well, why don't we give you a go at curating or creating something unique for me? And the unique for me part is where I think it gets quite exciting, because then we think about, okay, well, what else have you done that's unique for you? Maybe you've invested in a piece of technology. Maybe it's a particular signature treatment you have, an aromatherapy line that means something. Maybe it's how you blend all these things together. Maybe it's your brand. Maybe it's the location itself, that every single person has something unique to offer. And my view is that wouldn't it be great to have a soundtrack that accompanies something unique that is distinctly yours, that can be leveraged to heighten that experience in the location? and be an extension of that location when you go off a property. So things you can gift to guests as an example, so that they can take away and remember the experience, or be used as a marketing anchor to bring them back in for another time, and all those sorts of things. So the way we then work is we kind of, again, work on call it an advisory basis, where we will create on a particular scope new pieces of music with our composers, and those become distinct to your brand, location, products, treatments, whatever is already unique to yours. We look to become the soundtrack to that. And then we distribute that either in location through your own instance of the kind of the stream portal, but also, again, we can look to use our consumer platforms for that. So far, we've only talked really about our B2B presence, and that's really been a kind of a nascent new thing that we launched relatively recently. But on the flip side of that, we have quite a significant consumer presence. So we're a preferred partner of Spotify, Amazon, Apple. We have a YouTube channel with 6.5 million subscribers on it, another million or so between 2 additional channels. So we have a very significant distribution channel into wellness enthusiasts and consumers through these consumer platforms. And when we create proprietary content, whatever that proprietary content is, we can distribute it through those consumer channels, and we can create branding moments. These are things that can be used on your social media as tags to, again, create this full encompassing feeling of what your brand sounds, feels, and looks like. And every time that it does that, particularly on these streaming platforms, it earns royalties. So now all of a sudden you have an indirect revenue stream that drives additional ROI. So the whole concept here is we wanted to take what was historically a cost center to a location, P&L expense, something that would be thought about once a year, maybe, if that. Maybe you go into longer term contracts and just kind of let it ride and forget about it for a while. We wanted to flip that to being an actual value driver, something that generates ROI, because that is the structure that has become the industry standard in entertainment, and that is what we're used to. So we're not doing anything crazy new. We're just borrowing strong precedent and making it very relevant and intentional for the spa and hospitality industry.
So let's say I own a spa, and it's called Sanctuary Spa, and I have 10 treatment rooms, and I can play different music in each room through the stream, and maybe different at the front desk because we don't want them going to sleep. But I come to you and I say, we're all about nature. We'd like more nature music, and you can create for me specific music that's mine. I assume I pay you for that, but then that music goes out into the consumer world and I earn royalties back when it gets played.
That's completely right. And so what would happen is, so once we establish what we want to create together, so let's say you say at Sanctuary, you have a nature-based ethos, and there are particular elements to it that are important to you. Maybe you've sourced natural ingredients and developed your own skincare line or your own aromatherapy. We would look at that in full. We'd also look at Sanctuary's branding itself. We would then design kind of audio frameworks and guidelines that would fit for a particular branding component to it. So this is where we might incorporate a sonic logo. So I'm loving it.
Mm-hmm.
Example
right.
of one which we absolutely would not use, but certainly it's a good example of how you can, without me having to mention that is McDonald's. I would be shocked if any of your listeners didn't think immediately of McDonald's as soon as you hear it, or even, you can do it with less. Like if you just have, you click on your laptop and you have an Apple laptop and it just goes, dum. That is an example of audio branding where you're creating a nice sonic moment that it becomes familiar with your brand. We think about those when we work with someone like Sanctuary, but then we think about the applications as well. So how can we deliver content that is proprietary and unique, that fits particular protocols you may have? Maybe the ingredients you're sourcing are from particular areas because you considered that as part of the chain when you developed your aromatherapy brand or your skincare brand. Great. We use instrumentation from the same places you sourced your ingredients. Maybe we actually come out and we record some of the natural environments. So the bird song that you might hear on the music we create are from your local trees, things like that. We just think about the intention behind how to knit everything together. And then what we would do is we would create a unique piece of music or several unique pieces of music or playlists, certainly motifs that then can be applied to other pieces of music as an example. And we would release those into the wild, as well as also into the stream so they can be engaged with in your natural environment. And every time that they are performed on the digital streaming platforms, and we'd have a specific distribution strategy to try and help support and commercialize and create marketing value. Sometimes we do that on a co-branded basis. Sometimes we do it under our own artist moniker. And we can do all sorts of interesting things with it. But yes, every time that they are then streamed, they earn royalties.
Fascinating. That is so clever. So can you give me a sense just like of what the cost of creating a playlist for my own self would be and how long it takes?
Yes, I mean, every playlist is different. So I wouldn't be able to give you one unless we spent a little bit of time going through Sanctuary as an example and understood exactly what the applications were and, what elements they are. It's like it's an a la carte menu as it were of all the different things we could think about, and all of them have differing elements of cost. What I can say is that, music can be created to almost any budget is what I would say. Now, there's different levels of quality, there's differing levels of reach and experience, and there's reasons why some will pay a lot for some music and others will pay a little for some music. For instance, we work with some very high profile branded talent. It's going to be very hard to get, high profile branded talent to create that sonic motif and then create a hero track that they release through their own for a few $1,000. But certainly we can do that. We can absolutely do that for a higher budget if that's something that people want to do. But on the flip side, if you have, call it $5,000 that you want to spend on a curated playlist, we can work to building a brief to make the most out of that particular budget, because our whole philosophy, and you kind of get the gist of this when we talk about how we price to remove this concept of zonal, it's all about trying to create value through created content. So everything we do is about saying, let's just start today and figure out how we can incrementally improve the value of the music in your location immediately. And then let's talk about the low-hanging fruit. What are the things that are most important? And at every step of the journey, what we attempt to do as a partner is sow seeds of confidence where you'll want to keep coming back and working with us. So the kind of way that we think about it is we try not to be punitive with our pricing. Now, clearly, we have artists who need to get paid, and we need to make sure that we're building a business here which is sustainable, but we do so in a way that is relatively considered about trying to help educate an industry who is historically not really paid for music, certainly not paid the budgets we're used to in entertainment. So, we've taken a very different approach. But the idea here is that we know that music has a level of value because we get paid quite considerable fees for the work we do within film music and TV music and advertising music. We know how much value it holds because no one would pay us if we didn't return additional value, times 10 or whatever it may be, and depending on the case. But the point I'm trying to make is we try not to be punitive with our pricing. We do it very much on a proposal basis, depending on what people are looking to achieve, and we're kind of just transparent and say, hey, what do you want to do, and how can we make it worth your while at this particular moment? And our confidence is that we've got great creators, and anything that we produce, you'll probably, at least so far, it seems that people have wanted to come back and work with us again. So that's been the exciting part for us.
How about the timeline, Freddie, like to create custom music? And again, I know there are many parameters, but is it a thing that you could do in a month? Does it take a year? Is it somewhere in between?
It can be as quick as a week, as long as a year. Again, it really depends on how much time and how much detail that goes into it. So a branding exercise is much like anything. If we're intertwining what the sound of your brand is or the sound of your location, it means we need to become intimately familiar with the things that make your brand what it is and unique. And then we have to translate that into the sound of music, which is absolutely doable. The actual effort, the hard part, is getting the briefing right. That's where the magic happens. The creation, we're privileged enough to work with real pros in terms of creation of music, so we can turn things around relatively swiftly. So as soon as we have a good brief, we can get music done pretty quick.
Amazing. Can you give us a sense of how Myndstream, the company, has grown, like from the inception of a few employees to now? Do you use contract work? What does that look like? What you're managing day to day?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey. We've still a relatively small team, I would say, in terms of the actual executives and operators. Small but mighty, as we would call ourselves. I've been very, very lucky to be joined on this by some very heavy hitting executives who, again, as I talk about very constantly, I'm always looking to balance out weaknesses, and I'm a young founder, as it were. Whilst I have some level of experience through my chartered accountancy training, I've been learning as I go, and I have a particular vision and philosophy. I was very lucky to grow up around music, so I understand it to some degree. But there are many people who understand publishing so much better than me. There are many people who understand wellness so much better than me. So many people who understand science better than me, and so on and so forth. The list goes on and on. And so, what I've focused on over the course of the last couple of years is thinking about those weaknesses and then bringing on key executives who balance it. So we're now in a position where we have an incredible executive team, all of whom come to it with their own unique skill sets. So my operating partner, Amy, who's been with me for now, nearly 3 years, I'd say. She's right towards the beginning. She was ex-global strategy lead for Innocent Drinks during the acquisition by Coke. She's a real operator. She understands strategy and commercial development. She knows how to get process in place so that things actually happen on time, which anyone who hasn't run a business before is really tough. And certainly something I didn't understand fully how to do, because I didn't realize how much pushing water uphill is a thing. But certainly she's been an instrumental part of our business. We've got Adrian O'Brien, who joined our team as our kind of head of marketing now just over a year ago. And she came out of being transformational marketing lead for Danone and Diageo. So worked on big brand campaigns for Volvic, Captain Morgan's rum and Guinness and all that. She's used to very big marketing budgets, which she's now sadly not got. But she's an extremely smart marketeer. Chris Cole, who's head of biz dev, he comes out of the first hire for Uber B2B. He built their B2B business in the EMEA region, so understands how to sell software, but also understands what it is to scale software and selling it. So understands what it means to make real commercial partnerships and drive them through for scale. So he's been an amazing addition. And I could sit here and go through the rest of them. Jordan, our head of creative, is amazing composer himself, and has worked with some huge talent, as well as also being the kind of core engine behind the Myndstream artist moniker itself. Which went from, we launched that moniker in June of last year with 10,000 monthly listeners, I think it was, and it's just surpassed 2 million monthly listeners on Spotify. Had over 100 million streams on that particular artist moniker, and that's just on Spotify and Amazon. So understands how to write music that people want to listen to, which is important, but also understands how to manage our 70 plus strong artist roster and brief new composers. And he certainly understands commercial music and how to work to brief and develop those briefs. So there's a lot of different touch points I could continue to talk about, but the way I think about our growth isn't in headcount, because I come from a family business. I've always thought about the idea of, I don't want to run hundreds of headcount. That's not the kind of business I want to be a part of. I want to be a part of people who want to be here for a long time, creating something with true impact, that is strong, profitable, grows sustainably, good business practices at its foundation, and not something that's just going to be a flash in the pan that we grow quickly. Right. That's never been my philosophy. So thankfully, I've been able to attract very high quality talent who are in it with me to build it. So that when I come on something like this or speak on stage at a summit or anything like that, I get to just go up there and kind of speak about the idea of what we want to try and achieve. And I know that the people who are surrounding me, we're all in it to deliver such a vision, and we've been able to so far. So the ambition is to deliver it at a scale that this industry hasn't seen before, which is what really excites us. And we know we can deliver that because we've done it before. We did it in film music, so we can do it again.
Sure. It's great to have that prior experience. I mean, your breadth of knowledge of how it all works, I'm sure, is very impactful on the people around you. You have offices in London, and do some of those people work in London with you, or is your team spread out?
Yeah, so everyone I mentioned actually is London, coincidentally. We do, except Jordan. Jordan is in Los Angeles. So we have offices in London, LA, and New York, headquartered in London. Jordan, who runs our creative function, and a lot of our composers are US based, just because there's still such a creative hub in America that it just makes sense for us to be kind of core based out of there. And also with the entertainment business, we have quite a significant creative function in LA. So creatives like to be around other creative people, as they should be. So Jordan's based out there, but Most others are based in London, although we're seeming to be much like yourself on flights every other week. So we'll be coming to a neighborhood near you soon, I'm sure.
For sure.
My BA account says so.
Yes, yes, you're getting that elite status for sure.
Yeah, doing my
So,
best.
how do we find Myndstream music on a platform like Spotify or Apple?
So the simplest way is if you type in Myndstream, which is MYND stream, and you'll find our artist profile, which has a selection. We curate underneath it a kind of a selection of the real music artists that we represent as well. So you'll be able to start experiencing artists like 2002 and Bernard Koch and some of the other musicians that we get to work with. And it allows us to essentially, it allows it to be quite easy for anyone to be able to experience the different styles and types of music. We also release, we're starting to release branded talent music as a part of our frontline releasing. So I know I've spoken on the summit stage last year about the exclusive wellness music partnership we have upcoming with Timbaland. We've excitingly got a launch date for that now, which is going to be at the end of this year. But we also just released the first of our sort of branded talent series with an artist called Jónsi, who's the frontman of the Icelandic pop punk band Sigur Rós. And myself as well, quite excited when we managed to pull this concept together, and that wellness music concept went out a couple of months ago and was really well received. So you'll also be able to find us through a few of those collaborations too.
Okay, perfect. So that's great for consumer. And of course, anyone who has a spa and wants to use it can find you at Myndstream, myndstream.com. I'd like to close by asking you about where you see the future going with music and sensory experience. I recently became aware of playlists like green noise and brown noise, which were things I'd never heard of. And it's really kind of interesting. The green noise is sort of water-based and brown, just another kind of white noise, right? But with a different tone or note. So there's that. And then which isn't really music, right? It's really a sound. But then there's what you mentioned earlier, Freddie, about making something so experiential that the music and perhaps the visuals and the movements of the therapist are timed together. Do you see a future in that evolving?
Absolutely. Yeah, the Summit Trend Report for the last 2 years has been very clear, and certainly someone like Ari Peralta, who's been very outspoken on this and written extensively on this subject of multisensorial. I think everyone in the industry is thinking now about ways to combine the things that they're doing well to create something more experiential and more unique, more memorable, more intentionally designed. And certainly sound has its part to play in that. It's a great knitting device to create that immersive ambience and experience. I believe that in silos, everyone has done great work to create strong, validated protocols, good smelling aromatherapies, and things to target the olfactory sense or whatever it may be. Great touchless technologies like vibroacoustic beds. I think the next stage is clear. It's creating protocols that combine them together. And I think a really simple device to do that is audio. It has a very important role to play from my point of view. I mentioned very briefly that I chair the Music, Health and Wellbeing Initiative, which is a newly founded initiative within the Global Wellness Institute. And the reason why I felt like it was important to do that was I wanted to create a cross-section of the music industry to start understanding the duty of care that we all have for functional music, and then develop a foundational framework that makes it very simple to put into practice what kind of content goes where, when, and how, and what's clear is that when you do this, you work with others always. Very rarely is music something to be listened to in isolation. Usually it's something that's happening whilst you're doing something else, be it going for a walk in nature, or be it lying on a treatment bed while someone is providing you with a facial with various different products on your face. There's a lot of different things to be cognizant of. I think what can be useful is, to this point around definitions, creating something that is simply defined, easy to understand, easy to put in practice. And my point of view was instead of doing that just as Myndstream, whereby certainly we will walk where we will walk the walk, as it were, and learn from the findings ourselves and put them into practice. But those aren't the thing that makes us unique. Knowledge needs to be there for all, in my view, and that's why you'll have people like Tom Middleton and White Mirror, who's doing amazing things to create multisensorial experiences as part of spa treatments. He's one of the founding members of this initiative and shares the same philosophy as me in terms of wanting to understand the research. He does great things at his laboratory in Portugal in terms of wanting to understand insight and let insight drive creation. So, the knowledge side of things, even though we're both looking to curate sound and ambiance within a space, the idea of what those foundational pieces of information that allow us to do that as functionally as possible, optimized for the function, those pieces of knowledge aren't what creates the the uniqueness of a Tom Middleton composed piece of music versus a Myndstream composed piece of music. Our vision for this industry is that everyone should have very high quality functional music. The differences in delivery and distribution and the way that we might put them into practice, the different stylings, all the things that come together with being a music provider. And that's where I think it gets quite exciting, because that's when you can start thinking about application and really, that's where people should be focusing. It should be in the application, the actual making sure it's good enough and works. That should almost be, that should be commonplace, certainly at this stage, in my view. So I was being very excited by this initiative because it's allowing us to think about that quite broadly. And Tom, as an example, has been an amazing champion of that. And we have some other amazing people who joined us. So people like Brian Stone, who's senior executive at Universal, Rob Marshall, who's ex-Sony record label and Amazon Music and Spotify, and now is in focus in music and healthcare as the vice chair of that. An amazing music journalist, Kathy Olson, and then past president of the American Music Therapy Association, Dr. Laurie Gooding, and some real heavy hitters at a cross section from research through to distribution. It's all of the music industry kind of coming together with this unified view of, we need to understand music better, and then we need to deliver it, apply it for purpose.
Well, Freddie, that's amazing. And it's a testament to you and your connections that you're able to bring these heavy hitters to focus their attention on creating music for the wellness world. We know there is intense interest in wellness. People want to be well, and music does play an important role in that. So we're fortunate you have turned your bright eyes in our world. Thank you again. And for those listening, the Global Wellness Institute initiatives are doing work that is available to everyone. You can follow along. You can, read the white papers. Just go to globalwellnessinstitute.org and you will find a list of initiatives. There are 30 some, and they're all doing great work. But we thank you for yours. Again, Freddie Morose, CEO and founder of Myndstream, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thank you for all the amazing work you're doing for the spa and wellness businesses of the world.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.